Hello and welcome back to Not Overthinking. Taimur, how are you doing today?
Mate, I am knackered. I've had 5 hours sleep for 2 nights in a row, and so I feel like a bit of a zombie right now. But I'm sure this is going to be a fun convo. How are you?
Not bad, mate. I've actually had a great day. Sheen and I went shopping in Brighton, and I basically refreshed a large chunk of my wardrobe. And I
Oh
was like,
yeah?
I've never had so much fun shopping before in my life. But it's like I was going into shops with the intent to buy stuff, and I was like, I found good things, tried them on. I was like, okay, this is legit, and I'm gonna buy it. It's like I've just like never ever done that before, and it was so great. We were just walking around with these bags everywhere, and like we'd walk into a shop as it was about to close, and I think they'd see the bags in our hand and be like, "Oh no, it's fine. We'll stay open for another like 20 minutes or something." Just like usher us in, and it felt like a very nice experience overall. So good vibes.
What kind of stuff did you get? What's the new style?
You'll see. I might do a clothing haul for my YouTube channel.
Awesome.
But like this hoodie, for example, it's like really soft, isn't it? Soft.
Oh,
Yeah, it's really soft. But enough about me. Today is an exciting day because we are joined by a returning guest.
yes, hello. Do I say my name?
Yeah, Lucia, can you introduce yourself to the
Yeah,
listeners?
my name's Lucia. I'm a friend of Ali and Tames. It's my identity, apparently. No.
I feel like we're bad at introducing guests. I feel like the right thing
I
to
think
do
you
as the
need to say
host.
their name. You
Yeah,
can't make.
the right thing to do is,
Yeah.
we're really excited to have a very special guest join us this week. Lucia is returning to the podcast. She's a very good friend of both of ours. And we're going to talk about, whatever it is we're going to talk about. I think that's what the intros need to be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I have to say, I agree. I felt very unsure of how to
Okay.
take the lead on that intro
Yeah,
there.
it was very
No, I do.
flaccid, Ali.
I do apologize. I do apologize.
Alrighty. How
Yeah,
are you,
so
Lucia?
Yeah, I'm good. We've had a fun weekend. We've been in Brighton, and we've been enjoying the beach and walking around and chilling. Yeah, been great.
Oh, nice.
bit of a staycation,
Yeah.
if you will. Before we dive into the topic of this podcast, we were looking at to see whether we've got any sponsors lined up, and it seems like we actually don't have any sponsors lined up for the next month or so. And I was chatting to one of our other mutual friends, Paul Millard, who's been a guest on the podcast, I think last week for his podcast. It's all very meta. And I mentioned this sponsor thing to him, and he was saying that, yeah, like if you don't have a sponsor for an episode, what you can do is you can like, in a way, you can replace the sponsor with like a shout out to something that you think deserves attention or warrants the audience's attention
Yeah.
without being paid for it. And so, Lucia, you were saying earlier that you would like to do the sponsor plug. So do you have anything that you would like to give a shout out to? Like this episode is brought, well, in this episode, we're going to give a free shout out to.
Should we give a shout out to LEEP? Is that legit?
I feel like we're talking about LEEP for the whole thing anyway,
Okay,
so
okay.
we should shout out something else. Is there any other cause that you would like to be shouted out?
We could shout out to GiveWell.
Okay, what is GiveWell?
Yeah, GiveWell is a charity evaluator. They do really great work researching high impact charities, and they have like recommendations for places where you can like have your most impact with your donations. Is that a lame shout out?
Usually, you want to have a call to action.
Okay, the call to action would be to go on the website and read about it, and even think about donating to GiveWell recommended charities.
Nice, and that's givewell.org, which will be linked in the show notes and in the video description wherever you're watching this. So thank you, GiveWell, for not sponsoring this episode, but for doing good work to help save lives across the globe.
Yeah,
Is that fair enough?
yeah, nice.
Yeah, how's that?
Very good. That's cool. I like that idea of like a non-sponsored sponsor.
Yeah,
It's cool.
like a free shout out to, this thing is kind of cool. Y'all should check it out.
Yeah.
Anyway, on to the topic of this episode. We didn't quite have a defined topic, but I thought it would be interesting to get into the charity that you're running. Because you featured on the podcast, I think a few months ago, or maybe sometime last year, and we talked a lot about effective altruism as a concept and sort of the theories behind it, and how, for example, the pledge that Taimur and I have taken, the giving, and you of course as well, the giving what we can pledge to donate 10% of our income each year to effective charities. But since then, you've actually started your own charity, which is
Yeah.
very cool. And so I thought it would just be cool to talk about the experiences of that and how that's been, if you're down.
Yeah, that would be fun. I'm up for talking about that.
Sweet.
All right. Let me add a bit of structure by asking some questions and things like that. So I think it'll be helpful, if folks haven't listened to the previous episode, let's just chat a bit about kind of your background, how you got into this, and then we can kind of get into the details. So, do I have this right that roughly you studied medicine and worked as a
Pretty
doctor?
rough.
Sorry?
It was pretty rough.
Nice. So, studied medicine, worked as a doctor for 2 years, and then decided to take a career break from doctoring to start this charity. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, cool. And what was before we get into the sort of charity itself, what was kind of the thought process during university of like, how do I, what do I want to do with my life? How do I want to contribute to the world? And, how did you get into sort of just briefly into sort of all this effective altruism stuff? And yeah, how did you get onto this path where starting a charity is a thing that's even on your radar, Because I think
Yeah.
for most people it's just not on their radar.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely wasn't for me to begin with either. I guess going back to the like, how did you start thinking about like the effective altruism thing and that kind of thing? It probably goes back to reading a paper by Peter Singer, who's a philosopher, called Famine, Affluence, and Morality. And he basically makes the argument that if you can prevent suffering without sacrificing something of like equal moral significance, then it's wrong not to do so, or it makes sense to do so. And it shouldn't make a difference whether that person is like a neighbor or someone right in front of you, or whether that person is thousands of miles away in another country. That we kind of have an equal moral responsibility to people who we can't see and people whose lives we're not connected to as we do to those right in front of us. Or maybe not equal, but it's not like that materially different, the like moral responsibility that we have. So I think then that's like quite an important idea to me that I pretty much agree with. And so going into my career, I wanted to do something where I could have like a positive impact on the world, prevent suffering and that kind of thing. And naively, perhaps, I thought, oh, well, I'll be a doctor then. I thought I'd probably work in public health or global health or something like that. So yes, that's why I went to medicine. And then in med school, I got involved in the effective altruism movement, which I think we've probably talked about quite a few times before. But basically, it's this idea that you can use like evidence and reason to work out the most effective ways to improve the world, and then try and act on it. And yeah, so that's kind of like my like main interest, and medicine was what I was doing. And so I was always thinking of ways to increase my positive impact beyond just like working in clinical medicine, treating one patient at a time, but not really having much of a wider, you're limited to some extent. Like you just are in like traditional clinical medicine.
So
Yeah.
at what point did the prospect of starting a charity kind of come onto your radar as like a thing that people do, and as a thing that maybe what you could do one day?
Yeah, it was actually, I saw a friend do it. A friend of mine started Fortify Health, which is a GiveWell Incubator charity fortifying wheat flour. And
What does that mean?
so, like anemia, micronutrient deficiencies are quite a big problem in a lot of parts of the world. So you can add iron and other micronutrients to wheat flour, and then the idea is that people will then be less anemic, and that will improve their quality of life and that kind of thing. So that's what she does in India.
Okay, so how recent was this? Was this like a couple of years ago, or this was like a decade ago?
This was like 4 years ago. So yeah, it wasn't really on my radar like most of the way through medical school. And then
Okay.
I always thought like, starting a charity, starting a business, that sounds like something that's not really the type of thing that someone like me would do. It sounds like the type of thing that like, I don't know, a charismatic entrepreneur would do, who's like, I don't know. It was just never something I thought of as something that I would do.
Okay,
But
yeah.
then I saw this friend do it, Nikita, and I saw like she was like, I don't know, more relatable to me, I suppose. And then I was like, okay, that's now in the list of options of things to do.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, so you knew people started charities, but they looked very different to you. You know, they're probably like male, they, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then after seeing someone who was kind of your mate, who, you know, that was like, well, I could do this, basically.
Yeah. So I guess one thing was that I found her quite relatable. And the other thing is that when you see someone do a thing, you realize like the steps involved. And it's not just like start a charity. What is that? How does one do that? It's more like, okay, you come up with an idea, you get seed funding, you like all the kind of smaller processes within it become more understandable and doable when you see someone do something. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No, absolutely. It's like with anything else where, you know, to a lot of people, starting a YouTube channel might feel like, oh God, this is like a black box. I wouldn't know what it takes. But for example, for you now, starting a YouTube channel would be very reasonably within the realms of possibility because you know what all the steps are. Yeah. Equally for me and Taim, starting a charity is a black box. Like, how do you even go about it? But if one of our if we were along the journey for you starting your charity, we would know that, okay, these are the steps involved. Yeah. And we know that we've got you. So now if we want to start a charity, we'll be like, hey, Lucia, how does one start a charity?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's actually like an incubator of charity startups for charity ideas that are very well researched. And the idea is that they are like very high impact and cost effective. So I joined that charity incubator called Charity Entrepreneurship. And that was another thing that helped. I think without that, I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to do it either, because again, it's just like, there's so much you need to learn. I guess you guys have both started like businesses, so it's kind of maybe you know about this, but there's just so many different aspects of like running a new organization, and it is quite daunting if you don't have someone like guiding you through stuff as well. So it's like knowing people who've done it, it's understanding the process, and also having that support of the incubator and the incubation program made it a lot more feasible for me, I think.
Okay, so if I can summarize the journey so far. So my understanding is at the age of 12, you discovered the writings of Peter Singer.
I did, yeah.
You realized, oh my God, like this guy has been putting into words the feeling that you've had in your mind for such a long time, that this idea that often people would use the example of, let's say, the child drowning in a pond in front of you, and obviously you would jump in and save the child if they were literally drowning in front of you. And if it's like, okay, what if your £3,000 suit got ruined in the process? Well, of course you would still jump in and save the child, because the life of a child is worth more than your £3,000 suit. And then it's like, what if that child were like, across 100 meters away from you? Would you still jump in? Of course you would. What if they happen to be across the border in a different country? Well, just because they're in a different country across the border doesn't necessarily, of course they're still worth saving. And you extend that far enough, you get to the point that, there are millions of children dying all around the world that we can't see. Are they worth any less saving than our own like cost of a life? And would we pay a certain amount of money or do certain things to save those children who we can't see? And there's this idea, I've done a video about it on the YouTube channel, which is that basically, as you said, just because people are far away doesn't mean their lives should be morally worth less than the lives of people that we know necessarily. And so you discovered that sort of thing, and that led you to, for example, like the effective altruism movement, which includes things like 80,000 hours, and GiveWell is sort of associated with that. GiveWell being this charity evaluator that basically ranks charities in terms of their cost effectiveness. And then you got super involved in this thing during university, in an attempt to try and reduce suffering in the world in a sort of scientifically based kind of effective way. And then 6 years of university, 2 years of being a doctor, and now we're both in our career break, where I've decided to screw around and make YouTube videos. And you decided that the way you could have the most impact on reducing suffering in the world, which is your primary driver, is through starting a charity.
Yeah.
Nice. So before we get to the charity itself, so 4 years ago, okay, so presumably you have known that charities exist and that people have started charities for a long time. 4 years ago, one of your friends started a charity. What was then, and 4 years ago, you would have been the final year of med school or something?
Penultimate.
Okay,
yeah.
So you're still in med school 4 years ago. Your friend started a charity, so now it's kind of on your radar. What were sort of like the key turning points between then and now that kind of got you to actually do it?
Yeah, so I think one thing was that for a while I was thinking I should, carry on with my medical training, specialize in something, be fully legit, fully qualified, and then I can go and do the more impactful stuff. But then I realized, like, what am I really waiting for? A lot of this, you gain a lot of skills specializing in like a medical specialty, but they're not like that relevant to some of the maybe more impactful paths that I would consider taking. And also the best way to like learn the skills of doing something like a charity startup is probably to do it rather than generally building career capital. So I thought let's not wait, let's get going, try and have an impact.
So why was it after your second year of being a full-time doctor rather than after your first year or even before even becoming a full-time doctor?
Yeah, so one good thing about doing it after your second year is that in the UK, after your second year, you're like fully qualified and it's quite easy to leave and come back if you want to. So it's a really easy way to keep your options open. Like now I can do the occasional locum shift, or I can take a couple of years out and go back full time, or go back to do some locums and that kind of thing. So it's just the keeping options open aspect. Same
So you have
with Ali, right?
a bit more of a safety net in case the charity thing doesn't work out. You could always just get a job as a doctor and then figure out the next thing.
Yeah.
Got it. That makes sense.
Okay. What was the story about how you decided to do this particular idea that your charity is now about?
Yeah, so that partly came through the incubation program. So charity entrepreneurship research charity ideas, and they start with hundreds of ideas and they narrow them down through this research process to identify the ones that seem most promising in terms of the potential impact of the charity that's founded. And they had a number of recommended ideas, and one of them was the one that we started, which I haven't even explained what that is yet, have I? So our charity aims to reduce childhood lead poisoning by advocating for regulation of sources of lead exposure in lower income countries. And that sounds like super niche, and like, why would you ever think of that? Like,
yeah, who cares about lead poisoning?
Like lead poisoning, lead poisoning, even as doctors, was not on our radar, was it?
It's like the fourth cause of microcytic anemia that you learn in a mnemonic, like TAILS, TAILS. It's the L in that mnemonic. Like beyond that cause of microcytic anemia, I've never once heard of lead poisoning as being a thing. So what's the deal with lead poisoning?
So basically, it affects 1 in 3 children worldwide. And it does have really significant impacts. The majority of the impacts of lead poisoning are not like so acute that it would bring them into hospital, but it's quite subtle things. When children are exposed to lead, it affects their developing brains because it's a neurotoxin. So it reduces their cognitive abilities, it reduces their intelligence, it causes behavioral disorders, and it has an impact on educational attainment, and it also has an impact on future earnings. So that's some of the most negative impacts of the kind of low level of lead exposure that 1 in 3 children are exposed to worldwide. And yeah, it's pretty scary and pretty significant. It's thought that 1% of the global burden of disease is caused by lead exposure, and that's partly because it causes intellectual disability, and that's partly because it also causes cardiovascular disease and renal disease. And it's also thought that $1 trillion.
That sounds like a sort of national level
of
dollars.
So basically, in some lower income countries, around 6% of GDP is estimated to be lost due to lead exposure, and that's because of the impact on cognitive development and future earnings. So it has this huge impact on economic productivity and poverty as well. So yeah, it's just as bizarrely neglected and problem with very low awareness and very few resources going towards it. It's not been researched very substantially. Like, it's not known what the sources are in a lot of countries, and there's very little money going into solving the problem. So it seems like a big problem, huge scale, affecting a lot of people, very significant negative impacts and very neglected. And so if there's a potential solution, it seems like a very good thing to focus on, and that's why we decided to focus on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So lead poisoning is this thing which is like this grumbling low level of like badness in the world, to the point where some people estimate that it's like 1% of the global burden of disease. 1% of the global burden of disease is a hell of a lot of disease caused by lead poisoning, but it's not something that you can point to as being like, oh, lead poisoning causes this thing, and therefore no one is really doing anything about it in some countries, because like it's sort of like in the background, and it doesn't really affect something that you can see like immediately in front of you.
It's very invisible. Yeah.
Okay.
And $1 trillion lost to the economies of low and middle income countries every year. Like, it's just insane. Like, how did I not know that before? But anyway, there you go.
Okay. So so the charity entrepreneurship has identified that, hang on, there's this lead poisoning thing, which is a pretty big deal, which no one is paying attention to, and which has very little money going into it. And then they're thinking, okay, if we as an organization can do something about this problem, then the amount of impact we have is actually pretty huge. Yeah. Because this is such a huge problem. So what can you then do about it? Like, surely if it's such a huge problem, it's like insurmountable almost.
Yeah. Well, you'd think so, but it turns out that actually one important source of lead poisoning is lead paint, which is a pretty unnecessary problem. So lead paint is just, people put lead ingredients into paint, and they have done for a very long time, and they used to do it in the UK and the US and a lot of high income countries, because it can be a pigment, it can be a color, it can also help the paint dry. But it's not a necessary ingredient. There are alternatives, and in a lot of higher income countries, it's regulated. You can't put lead in paint, and so that means that children aren't exposed, because basically when the lead paint's on the wall, it forms like dust and flakes, and then little kids, they have like hand-to-mouth behavior, and they get the paint from the floor into their mouth, and they get lead poisoning. But it turns out in a lot of other countries, especially low-income countries, there is just still a load of lead in paint for no real good reason. Even in the countries that we're working in, lower income countries, there are alternatives available. It's just not known how much of a problem it is. And it's also not known that there is lead in paint. Like, obviously, probably some people know that they're putting lead ingredients in, but there's no evidence like at a national level or studies to show that there's lead in paint. So, yeah. So basically the solution is to advocate for the regulation of lead paint, to reduce lead poisoning in countries where there's a large burden of lead poisoning from paint.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So back in the day, we all used to put lead into our paint for reasons, because it like helps make pigments and all that crap. At some point, people realized, hang on, lead is kind of bad. Let's get rid of lead paint. High-income countries like the UK, the US, etc., said, we're going to have governmental regulation to make it illegal to have lead in paint. And obviously, once it's illegal, all of the manufacturers of paint have to be like, all right, let's figure out alternative ingredients that don't involve lead. Yeah. To the point that now in the UK, like, there is no lead in paint. No. Because that's just dumb. Like, why would you have lead in paint? But in a lot of other countries, that's just not been a thing. Like, there is no, it is not illegal to have lead in paint. And because it's not illegal and no one is really paying attention to it, you're saying that it's just kind of, paint has had lead in it for the last like 50 years and no one's done anything about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing that you're doing about it is what?
Yeah, so we're advocating for lead paint regulation, which sounds kind of vague, like what does that really mean? But what we actually do is we identify countries where we think there's likely to be lead paint on the market. So for example, we identified that we thought there was probably going to be lead paint in the paint market in Malawi, because there was in neighboring countries. It hadn't been studied in Malawi, so we didn't know for sure. But we wanted to find out. So we went to Malawi, we bought a load of paint. We went to all the paint markets, all the hardware stores, spoke to the painters, and bought a load of paint. We dried the paint, and then we sent it to a lab and then had it analyzed for lead. And we found out that over 50% of the solvent-based paints contained high levels of lead. And that wasn't something that was known before. So we took that to the Ministry of Health and to the Bureau of Standards, and we explained that this is a problem, this is the consequences of lead exposure, there are alternative ingredients available, we can help manufacturers switch to lead-free, and the Ministry of Health said, okay, we will implement the regulation. So they actually did have a a regulation in their like in the book saying like there should be no lead in paint, but no one had ever kind of put much emphasis on it. No one had monitored or enforced it because it wasn't really known to be a problem. But once we showed that it was, they were like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. We will start monitoring the paint on the market and we'll start enforcing regulation.
Hang on. Right, so let me get this straight.
Yeah.
You realize, hang on, this lead paint is like a global problem. You pick a country and you're like, you know what? Let's just fly to that country, buy a crap ton of paint and just test it for lead.
Yeah.
And you and your mate go to Malawi and just buy a load of paint.
Yeah.
You send it to a lab to test it for lead. You realize, oh crap, this paint has got a load of lead in it. Then you just chat to the government and you're like, bro, do you realize your paint has got loads of lead in it? And they're like, oh yeah, that's a good shout. We should probably do something about this.
Yep.
And in like, I don't know, like one conversation, you've just theoretically enabled the passing of legislation to make lead paint illegal in this country, which has like a national impact at the country level. Yeah,
except they already had the legislation, so they're just going to be implementing the legislation that was previously.
Okay. So someone had this bright idea before that. Hang on, this lead paint thing is a bit bad. But I guess if it's if it's not one of those things that immediately comes to mind as a bad thing, people would just be like, oh, it's just one of those laws. No one really enforces
I think
it.
Basically like when people put standards in, so it's like a mandatory standard, but when people put standards in, I think often they do like kind of the normal paint standard basically. In the normal paint standards there should be no lead in paint, and you know, lead in paint's bad, but they didn't actually think there was lead in paint in the country. They had no reason to believe that there was lead in paint. I think they thought that it was kind of an outdated thing that had been phased out a while ago, which is I think what a lot of people think. Like I'm sure that's so they had no reason to be monitoring the paint or enforcing it. And then when we said, hey, there is actually a load of lead in the paint, they were like, okay, yeah, that is very bad. Of course they care about the health of their population, so they will start implementing the regulation. So that's
nice.
that's what we're going for, and it seems to be good. I mean, we did do this research, the like paint study in collaboration with the University of Malawi with a master's student there. So we had that input there to make sure we kind of understood the context and the paint market and kind of but so that sounds pretty good, right? Like, oh, you know, now they're enforcing the regulation, but that might not be sufficient. Like, it can be hard to enforce regulation well. There are probably a lot of countries where there's regulation that is being enforced a little bit or not very well, just because it's I think there are lots of things that can come up there. So the other thing we're doing is we are talking to the paint manufacturers in Malawi, and we're saying, hey, we found that there's a lot of lead in your paint. This is really bad for these reasons, and a lot of the time they're not aware of the harms of lead, or even not aware that the ingredients that they're putting in have lead in. So they've been like, okay, we're happy to talk to you about that. And we explain like, this regulation is now going to be being enforced. We can help you find alternative ingredients. We can help you reformulate your paint and make it safer. And they're like, yeah, sounds good. So we're working with them to help them reformulate their paint. And one of the main kind of things that we're doing with that is actually just identifying the lead-free ingredients, finding like cheap lead-free ingredients that are available in the country. And we're going to like give them a list and say, look, here, it's pretty easy. Just kind of facilitating the whole process to make sure it happens, because ultimately we want lead paint off the shelves. We don't just want there to be regulation or there to be like it to be said that it will be enforced. We want to like be able to, when we repeat our study in a year or so, we want to see that there's actually less lead paint on the shelves, because that will mean there'll be less lead paint on people's walls and there'll be less lead poisoning in the children.
Got it.
Yeah, it feels like this is one of those problems where like everyone is weirdly on the same page. Like,
there's no like big lead.
No one campaigning to have lead in paints. No like reason to do it. It's just like a relic of a bygone era, and everyone's like, you know what? Let's let bygones be bygones, and let's get rid of the lead. And so the government's like, yeah, makes sense, and the paint manufacturers are like, cool, yeah, makes sense. You're like, great. Let's all be friends. Let's all work on this together. Yeah. It's not like, I don't know, lead is like 10 times cheaper than anything else, and therefore there's like a battle with the capitalists or something like that. It's just like everyone's like, yeah, we should probably get rid of the lead.
Yeah, yeah. It's cool.
I
Yes,
I
it
think
did
it's
seem
worth.
like one of. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It does seem like just one of the main things is just before there just like wasn't the data or there wasn't the awareness. So that's like a big part of our role is just generating that data about there is lead in paint in this country and this is why it's bad and this is a solution. Like it seems like that's kind of
Yeah.
the bottleneck.
Yeah,
I, I,
it's pretty amazing that you can have that just rock up to, or anyone in a country can just like buy a load of paint off the shelves and literally just test it for lead. And
Yeah.
then that just has the potential to have such a big downstream impact.
Yeah, I think it's worth taking a step back at that because from what you've described, it sounds very straightforward. Just show up to Malawi, buy some paints yourself, send them off, put it in the post box to get tested by some lab somewhere, and then send some emails to the government and chat to them. It sounds very straightforward, and I imagine there was probably a lot of complexity that goes into that. But I also imagine that, before you did this, what was your perception of like how difficult this would be, or like how many barriers there would be? And like, did you have the sense that, okay, we're basically just going to show up in Malawi, buy some paint? Did you have a sense of that, or did it feel like this is going to be some huge thing? There's going to be like a bunch of red tape, like.
Yeah, we definitely thought it would be a much more of a big, difficult like process. I think we thought, well, one, we didn't know that there was going to be lead in paint in Malawi. Two, we didn't know if we would be able to get meetings with like the relevant stakeholders, like would the public health experts and the Malawian public health experts and like policy people, would they be interested in talking to us and giving us advice? Turned out everyone was super helpful. Would the Ministry of Health be interested in talking to us? Would the Bureau of Standards care about the research we're doing? Like all of these things we thought would be a lot more difficult, but everyone who we've spoken to has just been very helpful and like just agreed that this is a problem that can be solved and should be solved. So
Right.
we've been super on the same page. So I think we thought this could take a couple years. We thought we might have to re-strategize or So it was a surprisingly simple deal.
I think often before like doing something that you've never done before, there can be kind of mental blocks where you feel like there's probably some magic spells that need to be done that I don't have access to. Like, oh, you probably need loads of connections to do this thing, or like you probably need to I need to have had a PhD in lead paint before anyone would take me. So were there actually any magic spells involved in making this happen?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
I thought there would be, but I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
I think being a doctor and having a medical background probably helped with credibility when like trying to get meetings and speak to people
Yeah.
and that kind of thing.
And I guess no one asked whether you actually had a PhD in lead paint.
Luckily, no one asked if I had a PhD in lead paint.
It's like, yeah, she's a doctor. All right then. 2 years fresh out of med school. Nice.
No, but I mean, like, I don't think I would have been confident to just be like, 2 years fresh out of med school doing this stuff if we didn't have the input of a load of experts. Like we were talking to the leading academics in the field. We're talking to like the experts, context-specific experts, country experts, people who've done similar interventions, people who work in other lead NGOs. Like we had like a lot of expert input to guide us. So we're not really just going and doing this thing on our own.
Yeah.
We're just like the actors at the end of a chain of a lot of expertise and input, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to kind of do a time skip back to a few years ago. My mum and I have been watching Lost recently, and we're now on sort of season 5 and 6 and 7, where they're sort of jumping back and forth between different timelines. And so if we can jump back to the timeline where, let's say you're a first year doctor, like it's your first year working full time as a doctor. At this point, charities exist. Your friend has recently started a charity. Did you know about charity entrepreneurship, the sort of charity incubator at this point?
No, I didn't. I don't think
Okay.
they existed in my first
Okay,
year of
right.
school. Yeah.
And so at what point, I mean, what were you thinking in first year of med school? Was it like, okay, I definitely want to do this, career break thing after my 2 years, but I don't know what I want to do during the career break? Or were you actually just planning to keep going? Or
Yeah, I hadn't worked that one out yet. I think I thought at the beginning of med school, I thought, oh, maybe I will specialize in in public health or infectious diseases, one of those two, and then I will become a consultant, and maybe I'll work for like a big international organization, maybe like, I don't know, WHO, or maybe I would,
The who?
yeah, like the WHO or something like that. Like, what? Why are you laughing?
He was making a joke. Sorry, he was doing his bit. Please continue.
I feel like you've probably done that one before.
Yeah, it's classic.
Yeah.
Okay, so before you guys this, the sort of thinking was, okay, I'll like work my way up the ladder, join some big organization.
Yeah, or maybe
that
do
has
like
some
Doctors
brand name.
Without Borders or something like that. I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of the classic like medical student that wants to work in global health. You know.
Okay.
This may be a very basic question, but like, why? So, and we almost said it as a given that a doctor doesn't have very much impact. Like, can you unpack that for maybe the listeners who are not familiar with that line of reasoning? Like, why does an individual doctor have very little impact, and why was that concerning to you?
Yeah. So, I think basically it's because so there's maybe two parts to it. There's the impact of medicine as a whole in a higher income country is maybe not as significant as we think it is in improving quality and quantity of life. Yeah, like the biggest advances that we've had in terms of like our health and quality of life have been more related to the like social determinants of health and things like hygiene and sanitation and generally improved economic situations and that kind of thing, probably. And the interventions that we do in medicine obviously are impactful, but maybe they're not on the margin increasing health and well-being as much as we might assume. And then the other thing is that the individual doctor who's contributing to that is only responsible for a very small fraction of it.
So like, let's say there's a whole country and they install a sewage system, and prior to that they didn't have a sewage system. That installation of sewage system across the country, it's going to have like a ridiculously disproportionate impact on the quality and quantity of healthy living of people in that country. To the tune of that very few other medical things can come anywhere near having that level of impact. Maybe some people say vaccines, controversial. Vaccines would have that level of impact where, okay, you're actually affecting a large amount of quantity and quality. And everything else in medicine is sort of that like edge case of like, yes, you know, a really fancy, cool operation with like 100 people working on it can help save the life of a child who's got, I don't know, a disease or something. But it's not on the level of like, that's not an impact on a national scale. It's a big impact for an individual, but it's not a big impact for a large amount of people.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think that's pretty much part of that thing. Yeah, and then the other thing is that the additional doctor in a country like the UK is not going to be contributing. Is only going to be contributing to a small portion of that. So, like, you can look at, for example, countries by the number of doctors they have per person. And you can look at like metrics for like quality and quantity of life. And past a certain point, the additional doctors have a very, very marginal impact on the quality and quantity of life of the population.
Okay. So like if I wasn't a doctor, someone else would take my place in med school.
Well, even
if they didn't, like we have enough doctors in the UK that me not being a doctor, me taking a break from medicine is actually not having any impact at all. In the grand scheme of things,
a small impact, maybe a handful, like maybe 4. I'm just trying to work out how many like disability. Well, I don't know. Those metrics are maybe not that helpful, but yeah, over the course of your career, the impact that you can have if you're a doctor and there wouldn't have been another doctor taking your place otherwise, is much less than the impact you can have even by donating, say, 10% of your income to a charity that will carry out a health or public health intervention in a low-income country, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
So doctors doing clinical medicine, very little impact on the grand scale. I think that is often a thing that people find difficult to wrap their heads around. Like anytime I've mentioned this in a video, talking about impact from a utilitarian point of view, there are always comments being like, oh, but a doctor has a huge impact on the person they're serving in front of them right now. How dare you suggest that doctors don't have an impact? They do have an impact, and being nice to a patient is a huge impact.
Yeah, I guess,
Yeah.
we're not saying that there shouldn't be any doctors, right?
Yeah.
Or like that there should never be like some people caring for other people. It's more just like that one additional doctor is not going to contribute as much as potentially other career options.
Okay.
Yeah.
And given that you personally, were interested in maximizing the impact that you as an individual would have on reducing the amount of suffering in the world, it doesn't make very much sense for you to just be a doctor, even though just being a doctor is great and respectable, etc., etc. It makes more sense for you personally because you want to have a larger impact, to focus on the things that do have a large impact: public health, infectious diseases, developing countries, that sort of vibe.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you've like, I think a lot of people feel this working as a doctor as well. Like, you're very much working as part of a wonderful and well-functioning system. And you often feel that your individual contribution isn't making the difference. Like in the UK, like the NHS is awesome. But you being part of it is not the thing that makes it great.
Yeah.
And
that's exactly as it should be. Like, a healthcare system should not be dependent on the exemplary performance of individuals. It should be the system as a whole that delivers decent outcomes for patients, rather than individuals doing their individual thing necessarily, going above and beyond and being particularly special.
Yeah. And also lots of doctors are really awesome. Like, I don't feel like I'm particularly like, I don't feel like the next doctor is I'm doing a better job than the next doctor, like people are great and they'll do an awesome job without me. And if I do something that wouldn't otherwise be done, then I can actually have a counterfactual impact, or an impact that wouldn't otherwise be had.
Okay, so you're 2 years into your kind of medical job. You're kind of thinking, I'll do this by the kind of global health career book of, specialize in something, then, join the WHO or something like that, and then try and influence global health that way, playing it by the book, basically. At what point did you kind of discover or decide that actually, I'm not going to play it by the book. I'm going to I'm going to start this charity.
I guess that was to do with just seeing someone else do it and thinking that looks very impactful and very doable, right?
No, so but from what we've said, 4 years ago you knew your friend did it, but even as recently as 3 to 4, 2 to 3 years ago, you were kind of thinking, I will specialize and become a consultant and all this stuff. What was the more proximate cause of you starting the charity?
Impatience? I don't know. I was just I have an opportunity now to do the thing which is what I actually care about. And I didn't see a good reason to wait anymore. I think it was just that I had previously thought, follow this path that everyone else follows. It's kind of the default. And then I just realized that there's no real good reason for that. And I can kind of do the thing that I actually care about, and sooner rather than later. And also, I think I had gained the confidence to take a risk as well. So I think working as a doctor for 2 years, you start to feel competent, like a competent professional,
adult
who's working in the real world. You no longer just feel like a naive student. You feel like you can do stuff and that kind of thing. And I think I just felt like a more competent person, and I felt like I can take a scary risk to do something that's not the traditional path. And I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so I
for
think
sure.
maybe that was actually it in the end, was just me feeling like more confident to do it. Yeah.
Okay. What were your concerns before taking the plunge?
I guess it's just it's always a bit worrying doing something that's very different from what everyone else is doing. You often think maybe I've got something wrong. If everyone else thinks, following the more traditional path is like the done thing, the right thing to do, you need to be pretty confident to think that there might be a better alternative. And I think, yeah. Wait, I can't remember what the question was actually.
What were your concerns
my
before you
concern. Oh yeah, and the
actually
other
pulled the
thing,
plug?
the big concern is like, well, what is the best thing to do? Like, I'm always trying to like optimize, right, for like my potential impact, and it's not clear cut at all, like what the best route is, even what the best cause area is. Like, I care about reducing suffering, but maybe I should be focusing on animal suffering. Maybe I should be focusing on the long-term future. Maybe I should be reducing the risk of future pandemics. Maybe I should be, trying to improve conditions in factory farms. All of these things are very important and very urgent. And I spend a lot of time thinking about which of these I should take. And I think when you're trying to optimize a lot, that can lead to, it can make it very hard to take action.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'd quite realized that. I kept thinking, we've got to work out what's the best thing to do. What path should I take? Like, how can what's the best way to achieve these goals? But actually, if you you're not gonna come to a conclusive answer.
Right.
And at some point you have to do something. Otherwise you're just going to be spending your whole life researching and never making.
Be drowning in uncertainty.
Drowning in uncertainty. Exactly.
I love it. Very, very wise words spoken spoken there. All right, listeners, the joke here is that we had a conversation about this where I was advocating for this position of, there is uncertainty, but you have to eventually find some conviction rather than drowning in uncertainty. Anyway, I think some people, if they were thinking of leaving a traditional path, might be concerned about the social cost of what my friends and family think. Nowadays I get to say, I'm a doctor, and that's a fairly high status thing, and everyone knows what it means. If I'm then like, oh yeah, I'm sort of starting this charity. Yeah, it's like lead paint kind of stuff,
So
Yeah,
unglamorous.
not in the UK. I'm gonna do it in Malawi. Yeah. Were you concerned about that aspect of becoming a weirder person?
Yeah, a little bit. I was a little bit concerned about that. And I was also concerned about, I didn't want to lose that identity as a doctor, because it becomes, it's just scary to change your identity, especially when it's one you're comfortable with. But fortunately, a lot of my friends and a lot of my community are very engaged in thinking about things how I think about them.
Okay.
Like you guys and my friends in the effective altruism movement and my family as well. They're all very on board with this.
Okay.
Idea that aim is to reduce suffering as much as we can, or improve the world as much as we can. So for them, I don't think they would think badly of the switch particularly, or think it was a rogue move or not support me with it.
Right.
So I was pretty lucky with that.
Okay.
I think that probably helped me quite a lot, that my friends and community are quite supportive of these alternative takes.
Yeah.
So for you, it sounds like literally your life's aim is to reduce suffering.
What's yours?
Is that fair to say? And B, how does it feel speaking to? Because most of us do not have it as our life's aim to reduce suffering. Where does that come from?
Just seems like a really bad thing. I don't know. What's I mean, okay. I don't know if it's just reducing suffering or also increasing positive stuff like happiness and fulfillment and those sorts of things. But I think that is the aim. I don't get why it wouldn't be anyone else's. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about this, because I'm making YouTube videos, Taimur's making a number crunching tool. We both probably agree that if we were thinking as rational actors, we would be. It just makes so much sense to have your life aim being to reduce human suffering. But I certainly wouldn't. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so I don't know why that makes more sense to me than it does to you, or maybe it makes sense to all of us, but for some reason I find it more compelling, and like
yeah,
I feel more driven to act on it, and I wonder if like so okay so I suppose I can think about like when I first decided that made sense to me,
okay,
and
yeah,
then maybe that will explain why for me it's like quite maybe like a strong motivator. And I think for me the first time I started thinking that would be my aim was when I was at school and I had a friend that died, and I thought, okay, this is really bad. This is really bad for his family and for his little brother. It's really bad for his friends. And I thought, if I could have prevented that, or if I could reverse that, I'd give away everything I had. I'd give away all my toys. I would sacrifice a lot to save the life of my friend, to prevent the suffering of the people who lost him, and that kind of thing. And then I thought, okay, well, if I would do that, then why wouldn't I do that for someone else's friend or someone else's brother? It didn't really make sense that I would be valuing the person that I know and that's closer to me more than the person that other people care about. And so I thought, yeah, that's pretty messed up that we think like that we think that because they're close to us that they matter more than the people close to other people. And so, yeah, so then I thought, I just was really uncomfortable with that for a long time. And it didn't make sense to me at all why we behave like that. And then I read this Famine, Affluence, and Morality by Peter Singer, and I was like, yeah, that's what I think. That makes sense. And a real philosopher's saying it too.
yeah,
And yeah, I think that's it, basically.
yeah. Because certainly for me, and I feel like this is probably true for Taimur, and I suspect most of the people listening. We know that the aim of reducing suffering is like a good one, logically speaking, but we're not compelled to act on it. Just like, I know that eating meat is bad, and animals suffer and stuff, but knowing it and feeling compelled to act on it are two quite different things. And so I guess for you, I want, like, is it frustrating speaking to people who don't share that, who would agree with you that, yes, the aim of reducing human suffering in the world is a good one, but sorry, mate, I'm going to build a number crunching tool, or sorry, mate, I'm going to make YouTube videos about what's in my bag. Like, how does that feel from where you're sitting?
I wouldn't say it feels frustrating. Sometimes I'm like, how does that work? But overall, I find it reassuring that when you actually delve into it and when you actually talk to people, they do broadly agree. Like, everyone cares about other people. Everyone cares about the people close to them.
Yeah, but that makes it worse. That makes it worse. They all agree, and yet they're still making number crunching tools.
I use causal, and it's very, very helpful in my charity. So thank you, Taimur, you're contributing, and you're contributing as well. You help as well. So yeah, but
Thank you.
but I don't. It doesn't frustrate me. It just, I don't know.
It makes you sad.
It makes me sad sometimes, but also, I don't know. I haven't gotten my head around that one yet. I think it's something we talk about quite a bit. Like, why are some people like compelled to act on what they think is right, and why are some people more chill about it?
Yeah, it's true. It's true for, like, in my life, for example, the context in which I see this most often these days is everyone broadly agrees that relying on your job as your only source of income is probably a bad thing, and you should probably have other ways of making money just in case something bad happens to you or your job. But, like, of the people who agree with that, which is basically everyone, 1% of them will actually do anything about it and decide that, I'm going to start learning skills that let me create sources of passive income and so on. But broadly, everyone's gonna like no one's gonna disagree with the sentiment that it's kind of useful to have money coming in from things other than your job. Just like I don't think anyone's really going to disagree with the statement that eating meat is probably bad for animals, and we probably shouldn't do it. But then actually doing it is an entirely different thing.
So do you have the same thought sometimes with like, why aren't people making sources of passive income for themselves? Like, blows my mind.
It does blow my mind, yeah. But I guess for me, I've sort of resigned myself to the idea that people are, in a way, people prefer, what's the phrase? It's like the certainty of a suboptimal thing is better than the uncertainty of something that could be better. Well, I'm sure there's a more pithy, tweetable way of phrasing this. Or like a big part of it, just like, yeah, well, some people just aren't into that sort of stuff. Like, just like I agree with all of your stuff about veganism, but I'm still not not vegan myself.
You were this weekend.
I was this weekend. Yeah, Brighton is a very vegan-friendly place. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a leads to B leads to C sort of chain of logic that supports anything in this realm. So I was curious what your take on this was.
It seems like you're quite, from a young age, you've always kind of been intrinsically compelled to care. You've always just like really cared about this. And I mean, I don't know, from your point of view, has it taken work for you to sort of get yourself to take action on this thing, or is it, it just seems like a no-brainer? And like, are there, within the effective altruism community, are there people who were previously more in like Minor Ali's boat, where intellectually we agree with all of these things and we agree that, really it's not super justifiable to be doing anything other than reducing human suffering as effectively as possible? Are there like nice case studies of people who've gone from having their head in the sand like us to actually then, doing something about it like you?
Yeah, definitely. And in a way, you are case studies. Like Ali's taken the Giving What We Can pledge. He donates 10% of his income to high impact charities, and that's like a very that's like a huge contribution. So I think that is a case study in itself. But yeah, I think for me, it's like this, like almost like quite an emotional drive. Like I feel like, it's like I feel very bad about the suffering in the world. It upsets me a lot, and I really want to do something about it. Otherwise, I will feel even worse about it. Whereas I think there are a lot of people who are maybe more like you guys, and you're like, yeah, this makes sense as an argument, and maybe I don't like feel like super compelled and super strongly that this is something I have to act on, but it makes sense, and so I'll do something about it. And so they'll do things like take the Giving What We Can pledge, or choose like high impact careers, or donate to GiveWell and that kind of thing. I think that's very, very common in the effective altruism community, and I think
there was one blog post in particular that you sent me when I was querying this exact issue, I think like a year or two ago, about the internal careometer, and about how it sort of, forgive me for trying to describe you, but I think you have quite a highly tuned internal careometer. Like you genuinely care about the suffering of people around the world to the point that it does emotionally affect you. Whereas me and Taim care about the suffering of others intellectually, but unless it was someone in front of us or a close family member or a close friend, we wouldn't actually care about it emotionally. Like it does not register particularly highly on our internal careometer if it's someone that we don't know. And so this blog post, I'll put a link to it in the show notes if I can find it. It's like they argue that, in a way, we have to accept the foibles and weaknesses of the human mind and the inability to comprehend large numbers of things. Like, if a friend were to die in front of me, or if I imagine myself caring about one death, and then I try to imagine myself caring about 1,000 deaths or 1,000,000 deaths, it's physically impossible for my brain to comprehend that level of magnitude.
Yeah, you can't scale your care
exactly
that easily. Yeah.
And so what this blog post was saying is that recognizing that, okay, my brain is terrible at doing this thing, therefore I'm going to act in a way that recognizing my brain is terrible at doing these things, and I will not I will not require myself to emotionally care about the suffering of a million people. I will act in a way that makes me care about them because I know it's the right thing to do, even if I don't feel compelled to do so. And that blog post was like really sort of groundbreaking for me, because I thought there was something like, I thought I was weird, because if you would like, I thought it was weird that I don't lose sleep over the fact that someone's dying across, somewhere in the country right now. Like, I just honestly couldn't care less. But I know that logically speaking, I should. And it was a nice, like, oh, okay, cool. Like, you can actually be effective in this sort of altruism stuff without having that feeling of like emotional caringness.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think the other thing of like, as well as like the caring or the reasoning, is like the realization that there is something you can do. Because I think that's another thing that leads to inaction, even when you think it's an important thing, is that it's not obvious that there are actually things that can make a difference. Like, you hear a lot about, aid not really being effective, and problems with charities and that kind of thing. So I think that's another thing, is like realizing that there are interventions that are very evidence-based, and that have been shown to save lives and improve the quality of lives. And that's why I wanted to give the shout out to GiveWell, because they're one of the organizations that show that through really rigorous evaluation, and result in people not feeling as like helpless. Like, actually there are concrete actions, and there are ways to make a difference, and that makes it easier to try if you know that you can be successful.
Yeah, I remember reading the Carometer blog post. I think I should revisit it. We'll link to it in the show notes as well.
So I think, interestingly, like since the last time you've been on this episode, on this podcast, and our mutual friend Neil Nanda's come on as well, talking about similar things, you actually had quite a few people reach out to you about this sort of altruism-y type stuff. Who is the sort of person that feels compelled to reach out to you after hearing you speak?
So I think it tends to be people who already think about this stuff, and already kind of basically are already thinking this way, but then didn't realize that this is a thing that other people are thinking, or that this is like effective altruism is like a searchable term, and that there are things that they can do, and there are other people discussing this as well, and that kind of thing. I think that's often it, is like people who are like, this resonates with me, and this is already how I think about it, and they want to get more involved and find out more and talk to other people about it. So anyone is welcome to chat. Always happy to chat with people.
Nice. Yeah. And you had one of these encounters the other day. So this person, let's call her Jane, reached out to you.
Yeah.
What was that conversation with Jane like? Or like, what did Jane want, and how did she get value out of the chat with you?
Yeah. So I think she was like one of these people who's already thinking like this, and I think she had felt like I don't know, like kind of naive, and like, I want to improve the world, and people around her maybe are thinking, how sweet, but maybe slightly naive.
Yeah.
And then I think she listened to the podcast that we did, and heard about effective altruism, and she was like, wow, this is so cool. This is the thing. This is maybe not just me being naive. This is maybe an actual valid way of looking at the world, and of trying to take action in the world. And so, yeah, we had an awesome chat, talking about that, and talking about careers, and talking about how to think about what to do with your life, and that kind of thing. And that was really nice. And it reminded me a lot of when I first found out about, when I first read Peter Singer, and when I first found out about effective altruism. And it's very validating, I think. I think that's the main thing. Yeah.
Nice. And so, like, if someone's listening to this now and thinking, okay, I'm sold on this broad idea of effective altruism, do you have any recommendations for sort of next action step, potentially sort of stratified into low, medium, and high commitment levels?
Yeah.
if we can think of it in those terms.
Yeah.
Because I imagine most people listening to this are not going to suddenly quit their jobs and start an effective charity. That's a very high commitment thing. But like, what are the non-drastic things that one can do to have an impact broadly?
Yeah. So I guess the kind of lowest bar for kind of getting more involved is just like finding out more about it. So you can search effective altruism, read about it. I think the Giving What We Can website has like a useful list of resources to find out more. 80,000 Hours talks a lot about careers. They're quite focused on like impact in the long-term future. Or there's a couple books that are really, really interesting to read. So The Life You Can Save by Peter Singer and Doing Good Better by Will McCaskill. And there are podcasts as well, which are available if you search these things. So I'd say that's like the kind of the starting point is just like finding out more. And then a kind of medium thing would be thinking about, well, so there are two things. So I think the way that people often think about it is like, what do we have to contribute? We have our time and we have our resources. So your time could be what you're going to do with your career or what you're going to do with your spare time and volunteering. And you could like just start thinking like, you know, how can I have an impactful career, have a positive impact? And there are those resources like 80,000 Hours, and there are some other kind of career advice websites where you can think about that. And then if you want to do something with your money, which is also a really important way to make a difference, there's these high impact charities. So we mentioned GiveWell, which has a list of some really high impact charities. And then there's also animal charity evaluators if you're interested in the animal side of things. And there's also, you can make a commitment, like you can take the Giving What We Can pledge, like we've done, where you commit to donate 10% of your future earnings to high impact charities. So those are a couple of actions of varying commitment, I suppose.
Nice.
I don't know, can you think of any others?
Probably
quite a lot. Oh, getting involved with your local effective altruism community as well, if you're interested. So a lot of universities have them, some cities have them as well, and also you can start one if you wanted.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think like the Giving What We Can pledge in particular is very interesting. Like I'd heard about it first when we first became friends, I think in like 2015 or thereabouts. And it took me like 4 years to sort of get around to thinking, okay, I'm actually going to make this commitment, because I kept on thinking, damn, 10% of my income is a lot of money, and like I feel like I need that money to buy nicer clothes or like get more takeaways and stuff. And I don't know, I just had this thing of like, you know, that's like paying 10% more tax. Oh my god, I can't do that. I sort of realized over time that actually for most of us, provided we're above the poverty line, a 10% reduction in our kind of pocket money is actually not really going to have a big impact on our lives, and can potentially have a ridiculously large impact on other people's lives.
Yeah, it's just to do with like the global distribution of wealth. Like if you're on like the average starting salary of like a UK graduate, you're in the richest 3% of the world. Like it's totally insane on the scale of things. So it makes sense that money spent on someone in the poorer, I don't know, 50% could go a lot further in terms of improving their happiness. And there is like diminishing returns on how happy more money makes you. And there's also evidence that giving money away makes you happier because it's fulfilling and meaningful. I don't know. Have you found that?
I can't say I have on an emotional level, but I know it's a thing on a logical level, and so I'm like, yeah. The other interesting thing, so when you and I made a video where I sort of publicly took the pledge, you know, my mum wasn't a huge fan of that, because like there's this thing in Islam that if you give with your right hand, your left hand shouldn't know about it. This thing of like, oh, I should, you know, giving to charity should be like an anonymous thing, not a thing that you do for clout. And when you and I made that video where I was like, hey guys, you know, I'm giving money to charity every year, it ran the risk of sounding like I was trying to, I don't know, virtue signal or like do it for clout and things like that. And my mum wasn't like not a fan of this. But a few weeks after that video came out, I got an email from this guy, like I think his name's Ben, who runs the Center for Effective, in charge of Giving What We Can.
Oh yeah.
And had like Luke, yeah. And he said that sort of in the aftermath of that video, they had like a slight surge in number of like people taking the pledge. And he was like, if we compare it to what our baseline levels were, and then sort of that video's impact, he estimated that sort of because of that one video, an extra $1 million has been pledged to effective charities. And if it costs,
good.
And if it costs like around $2,500 on average to save a life via the Against Malaria Foundation, what is that, Taimur? That's like 500 lives saved,
something like that. Sure.
off the back of a single video. And I was like, damn, okay, like that felt good in a nice way, because it made me feel somewhat warm and fuzzy, which I don't normally feel, that the counterfactual impact of me making a YouTube video is actually somewhat significant. And by going down this path of becoming like an internet influencer talking about what's in my bag, there are occasionally times where drawing attention to these sorts of things can actually have more of an impact beyond what I would expect.
Yeah. Somewhat significant is an under exaggeration. 500 lives. Like, think about saving one life. Like, that's amazing. Like, that would be so cool. And 500 is, that's insane. So,
Yeah, that's very sick.
yeah.
I've
I think
been
the other
meaning
thing.
to.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go on.
I think the other thing is like, I think it's pretty uncomfortable for a lot of people to be like public about giving or public about like, I don't know, even like saying like, oh, I want to like reduce suffering in the world. Like,
Yeah.
like sounds
Like,
a
all
bit,
right, mate.
a bit cringe.
Yeah.
I think the reason why I think it's worth that cringe factor is you want to make it a norm, right? Like you want like, I don't know, giving 10% or thinking about these things to become like a cultural norm, and that's the way to contribute to it is just by doing it publicly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, we've talked about this recently, but I think a lot of people, it seems like you advocate for this whole effective altruism stuff. I think a lot of people would be hesitant to try and change other people's opinions on things, because I think there's a general sense of like, people can live their lives the way they want. If it works for them, then who are you to say otherwise or whatever. And there's this general sense that like being chill is a really good thing. Are you worried about like, I don't know, coming across as judgy or like preachy or anything like that?
Yeah.
If you're trying to like change people's views on things and being like, hey, I give all my money to charity, why don't you, kind of thing. Obviously that's not what you do, but like, are you worried about coming across that way?
Yeah, I do worry about coming across that way. And I think that actually what it is more like making it more aware that that's a thing that people do and that's an option, because actually a lot of people do want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rather than being like, you should do that. It's more like people do have those values and people do care about these things, and there are people doing them and you can do them too if you want to, kind of thing. Feels more comfortable that way. And I think also it's quite difficult to change people's minds if they actually don't agree. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for a lot of this sort of stuff, the pros and cons are just sort of worlds apart. Like, the downside of doing something, I don't know, an episode like this is someone might comment, be like, oh, you guys have got an agenda, you guys are being a bit preachy. It's like, okay, cool. The potential upside of doing a podcast like this, or you kind of spending your life talking about this sort of stuff, is actually you could literally save one, if not two, if not more, if not hundreds, if not potentially thousands of lives through the stuff that you're doing. And so if a couple of people are like, oh, felt a bit uncomfortable by the fact that you felt, you were telling me to donate 10% of my income. Okay, fine. Easy price to pay. I pay that price any day of the week.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Ben?
Yeah, no, I back it. So on that note, I've been meaning to actually at some point get around to taking the pledge. So I think I think now would be a good time to do it. So we can go through the process now, and hopefully that can walk people through actually what it looks like. So I'm on my phone. I'm going to, what am I going to?
Giving what we can.
Giving what we can. I'm searching that on Google. I'm clicking on all right, I clicked on the ad version of the thing, so I'm already net negative. I've cost giving what we can, maybe like 10 cents or something.
You probably have a Google ad grant. It's probably.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, nice, awesome, yeah. All right, I'm on the website. I'm clicking on join.
I suppose they've done that because they don't want other people bidding on that keyword. 10% of your income. Here are the bank details.
Right, I clicked on join from the menu. There's a bunch of text. I'm not going to read it. All right, there's a section saying the pledge. There's 3 bullet points: 10% plus of income, lifetime/career long, and donated to effective charities. And then there's a button saying take the pledge, and then it says join 5,916 members. So I'm clicking this button called take the pledge.
That's a
Oh,
surprisingly small number of people.
yeah, I thought it'd be higher.
I
Now
guess
it's
we drink
asking
the
me.
Kool-Aid, so it feels like everyone knows about this stuff. But yeah,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
other people maybe, do it in other
Yeah.
ways and that kind of thing. But, yeah.
Now it's asking me to make an account. I didn't. That's a bit much. No, I'm kidding. So
First
I'm
name, last
clicking.
name, address. Oh my god. Screw that. I'll do it next week.
I'm clicking on sign up. All right, I have Google login. Nice.
Potentially quite impactful role of that developer that incorporated the Google login, knowing that there are some people that won't bother making an account.
I got my Google login password wrong.
And you're gonna get two-factor authentication.
I really hope I don't. All right, I've made an account. It says you haven't taken the Giving What We Can pledge. And I said, and I'm clicking, I'm ready to pledge. And now there's a button saying, take the Giving What We Can pledge. We haven't actually explained this, right? I think we all know what it is. Do you want to just quickly explain it, Lucia?
Yeah, it's a pledge to donate 10% of your future income, or your income, to the causes that you think are the most impactful, effective charities, basically.
So every year, 10% of your post-tax, like
Post-tax, yeah.
post-tax, okay. So the
Right.
government gets,
I guess
Gotta
it
be
depends
post-tax.
if it's like
I'm doing pre-tax. Come on, man.
yeah, there's actually an inner circle of pledge takers who are
So-
pre-tax.
I think I worked it out pre-tax, but then with the gift aid, it's kind of similar.
It's tax deductible.
Yeah, well, I mean, donating to charity is tax deductible, isn't it?
Fantastic.
Cool. Interesting.
Yeah, surely
Alright.
you know that. Yeah, so you can like work out like the 25 in the UK 25% gift aid, and then it's kind of it became quite equivalent post-tax plus pre-tax tax deductible
Oh,
situation.
okay, cool.
All right, I'm clicking the button saying take the Giving What We Can pledge. Now I have to enter my date of birth. Mate.
Your social security number.
I have to add my home address so they can send me a copy of my pledge.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
nice.
you get a nice certificate.
Okay. Next. I have to enter my income.
We should get him to take the Founders Pledge next time.
Oh yeah.
Mate, we need to stop having you on the podcast, all right?
It's an expensive hobby.
We didn't even have any sponsors this week. Okay. I have to convert my salary into dollars. Oh no, I made a new tab and now I've lost the tab. Well, guys, I tried. Yeah.
You might as well just give up now.
All right. How do I search through tabs in iPhone
You
Safari?
click that little tab thingy. Have you got like a zillion tabs open?
Yeah.
Oh no.
There must be a search, lad. I'm scrolling through many tabs.
Absolute nightmare when that happens.
Got so many tabs.
Oh, if you go all the way to the top, you can then search tabs.
Oh, there we go.
Like
Nice.
literally all the way. Yeah, there we go.
I feel like we're gonna have to cut some of this out so people don't think it's such a laborious
Yeah.
process.
Take the pledge.
Yeah, this is actually net negative. People were thinking of taking the pledge until we got to this bit of the podcast. Okay, got it. Right, next.
Should we say if anyone's listening to this and you're taking the pledge as a result of this episode, then email us to let us know, and we'll give you a free year of access to our members-only community where we have weekly events and Zoom calls and stuff to hang out with people.
Oh, cool.
That would be fun.
Can I join?
Of course, you
Sounds
take the
fun.
pledge.
Yeah.
Make sure you email us evidence.
I will email.
Yeah, and we'll get you in.
It's asking me where do I plan to give the money. There's a bunch of
Lead
options.
Elimination project.
Yeah, all of mine is going towards lead elimination.
Yeah, that's not like a commitment that they're just trying to, collect data. But you don't have to stick to the one you choose there.
I think I picked Against Malaria Foundation just because it feels like the easy one.
All right,
And
now
this is not like a legally binding thing or anything, of course. It's like a personal commitment. Yeah.
I'm now signing my name on the dotted line. And now it says, congratulations on taking the pledge. Now I can view your dashboard.
Well done,
Happy
you guys.
days.
How are you feeling?
It's been the most expensive 2 minutes of your life.
Yeah, it feels broadly. I feel broadly indifferent, but I know this is the right thing to do. And I imagine, once a year when I come to doing the thing, I imagine I'll feel good about that. And
Still waiting for that feeling.
any year now.
Yeah. One of these days.
No, look, it's obviously the right thing to do. All right, that's it.
Awesome. That's
stuff.
very cool. Where do you think you'll donate this year?
I think I'll donate to LEEP, man. Lead elimination.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where
that's what
else?
I'm donating this year. Because are we allowed to talk about the conversation you had recently with the
I
people?
don't think so.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to donate to LEEP this year.
Yeah, so by the way, LEEP is Lead Exposure Elimination Project, which is the name of our lead charity.
Oh yeah, we should plug that at the start.
Yeah. But so we've been going for like 9 months now, and we had a seed grant initially, and we would like to. So we worked in Malawi. We're working in Malawi, and we would like to continue working there to support the paint industry to actually switch to lead free. We've also expanded to Zimbabwe, where we're running a paint study. So early stages there, and we're also starting a partnership in Madagascar to run a paint study there. And we want to continue working in these 3 countries and also expand to hopefully a couple other countries to do the same thing, to get lead paint off the market and to reduce childhood lead poisoning. But we are lacking in funding. I think there's this difficult thing for
Here we go.
what
Go on, please continue.
there's this difficult thing for I think new charities where like you can often get seed funding if you have a good idea, or if there's and then there's like funding for more established charities, but there's often like a kind of a gap in the middle where it can be quite difficult to get funding kind of in the year 1 area, which is where we are right now. So yeah, we do have a significant funding gap to be able to continue what we're up to. So thank you guys. I very much appreciate you directing your pledge money to LEEP.
Nice.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to donate money to Lucia's charity, we'll stick a link in the
This
video
is so
description. You can
cringe.
check it out. Yeah.
I hate this. I'm so bad at fundraising. It's literally like the worst part of running a charity.
You know that have you seen that YouTube series Between Two Ferns? Mm-hmm. It's like Zach Galifianakis, and however he pronounces his name. He did an episode with Barack Obama, and it was just so funny where he was like, Barack was on there to plug his like Affordable Care Act or like Obamacare or something, and Zach was just
Healthcare.gov.
Oh, here we go. Do the plug. We all know the only reason you're here. It was like, well, Zach, there are 50 million Americans who are. Who I can't do it. Taimur, I feel like you did better at this.
I don't know the quote, to be honest, but we'll link to the video.
Yeah, good stuff.
Alrighty, should probably start to wrap things up. Maybe I'll read a review.
Subscribe to an apolitical podcast. Oh my god, unacceptable.
Alright, this is a 5-star review entitled "I love this podcast." This person says, "I have OCD and it is really hard to fall asleep without something to listen to. And I can honestly say I absolutely love this podcast. I'm a massive fan and it really calms me down when I have a panic attack. And I love the fact that you guys can get off topic and not make the episode boring. It allows me to realize I'm not listening to 2 robots who have been programmed to talk about just one thing. So thank you for everything and keep going. Love your content, Ali, on YouTube. And my favorite videos are your day in the lives. Have a great day and hope you get a chance to read this. Have a great day. Can't wait for your next episode." Thank you to DR Dubeef in Great Britain.
That's
It's a nice review. That's a nice review.
Good stuff. All right. Thanks.
Alrighty, Lucia, where can people find you online and learn more about LEEP?
Yeah, leadelimination.org. And if anyone wants to email me, my email is lucia@leadelimination.org.
Cool. And are you happy for anyone to email you if they've listened to this one?
Yeah, go for it. Email me. We can chat.
Nice. Good stuff. All right. Thanks everyone for listening in, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Great stuff.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening.
If you like this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on the Apple Podcasts website if you're not using an iPhone. There's a link in the show notes.
If you've got any thoughts on this episode or any ideas for new podcast topics, we'd love to get an audio message from you with your conundrum, question, or just anything that we could discuss.
Yeah, if you're up for having your voice played on the podcast and your question being the springboard for our discussion, email us an audio file MP3 or voice note to hi@notoverthinking.com.
If you've got thoughts but you'd rather not have your voice played publicly, that's fine as well. Tweet or DM us at @NOverthinking on Twitter, please.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.